a postgraduate Masters of Science in Medicine degree from the University of Witwatersrand. I hope I'm right. Excuse me, Madam Salma, if I'm wrong. And our guest speaker is Dr. Khalid Mirza. Khalid Mirza is the president of Overseas Community in South Africa. He is a very esteemed member of Pakistani community in South Africa. He by profession he is an esteemed surgeon and is in the profession for the past many decades. He is a guest speaker, and he will also, because he's a Pakistani migrant and a first generation Pakistani, and we are very proud of having him in the community. And he will be our guest speaker for today's webinar. The sequence of the presentation is, or the webinar is, first the session will be opened by the High Commissioner of Pakistan, His Excellency Dr. Mazhar Javed Sahab, and thereafter Madam Salma Ismail will give a detailed presentation on the process of registration and everything for 20 to 25 minutes. Thereafter, the guest speaker, Dr. Khalid Mirza, will speak for about 10 minutes, and thereafter we will take the question and answers from the participants. Webinar will be expected to be not more than 50 minutes and at max not more than 60 minutes. If you have any questions, keep writing them down during the webinar, and at the end we will address them in that 20-minute session. Contact details of Dr. and Madam. I request all the participants to mute their systems so that we do not have any disturbances during the webinar. Now I request His Excellency Dr. Mazhar Javed to formally open the session, please.
Thank you, Mara, and welcome to all our participants today. Just to give a and I'm sure today we will have a very useful discussion. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Sir, loud and clear, sir.
So now I'm audible.
Yeah.
Good morning and a very warm welcome to all my participants. I'm sure today we will have a very useful discussion which will kind of propel the process of establishment of deeper trade relations between, particularly in the pharmaceutical sector. Just to give a context, give a context to the event, Pakistan is attaching a lot of importance to Africa, and on that South Africa is the lead country. It is undertaking a major initiative, which is the Engage Africa. The purpose is to build closer cooperation with African countries and put emphasis on this continent, which is developing and changing very fast. In that scenario, trade and economy form a very, very important pillar of these relations. And ever since I've come here, I've felt the need to put a technical harmony in the requirements for exporting to South Africa and the database of our exporters, so that they are facilitated in exporting their products to South Africa, and both these countries can benefit from this mutual cooperation. I'm particularly grateful to Madam Salma, the CEO of the Twins Pharmaceuticals, for sparing her time to brief on the procedures, and I'm sure she has a long experience to that, to brief our potential exporters, businessmen, and other stakeholders on the procedures and the technical details of this relationship. And also, I'm extremely grateful to Dr. Khalid Mirza Sahab, who is also a personal friend, who represents the Pakistan's overseas community here and has been engaged with this medical sector for a very, very long period, maybe for more than 30 years. So with that context, I look forward to a very useful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Mazhar Javed Sahab. Now I would request Salma Ismail Saiba for her presentation on the subject. Madam Salma Ismail, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'd like to thank His Excellency, Mr. Javed, for the invitation to conduct a presentation to the people present at this forum this morning. And I really appreciate sharing the knowledge I've gained over the past 26 years within the pharmaceutical industry, and more so as a specialist of regulatory affairs. I will be sharing some slides with you, and Humaira, if you could assist me. Again, it's not giving me the option to share my screen. Oh, there we go. I think I have the screen going. So just be with me. Right. I would understand that each of you can see the screen. So again, thank you very much for the invitation. I would love to go through the following topics in terms of South Africa General, the overview of the regulatory framework within South Africa, the healthcare sector being public and private, the pharmaceutical market, just to share with people on this forum who are also, I would understand, from the Pakistani Manufacturers Association and so on, to have you empowered in terms of understanding which professional bodies we have within the pharmaceutical industry that you could pair up with or be familiar with. We will look at SAHPRA, our regulatory authority, a little about them, the registration processes, the duration, cost, certification needed. And I will round up this presentation with a brief about how Twins as a consultancy can assist you together with our partner sister company, Zimbili Pharma, as a local market authorization holder to assist you in entering the market. So in terms of South Africa and the general market environment, we're all aware of Pretoria being the executive capital for South Africa, and beautiful Cape Town with its Table Mountain as the legislative capital. For those of you who haven't visited, I hope I can promote some tourism post-COVID for you anyway. Our currency is the South African Rand, and we're sitting with a lovely large population of close to 57 million people. Now, as His Excellency mentioned, this already highlights to one that we're sitting with an emerging African market, and it makes this market a very lucrative market to be in from a pharmaceutical perspective. Our age structures, I've broken down the percentages for you, with majority of our population sitting in the age category between 15 years old and 64 years old. So you would understand the demographics in terms of the pharmaceutical side and how to target specific pharmaceutical products and therapeutic classes within those age categories. We have a GDP of about 6.5 USDs. It's super important that you're aware, as would be in Pakistan and any other country, our legislation dictates to us the environment, especially for pharmaceuticals. In our instance, we're sitting with the National Health Act. The purpose here is to just give us the general framework within our republic. Then we have the Medical Schemes Act, and this has to do with funding of healthcare services. Super important in terms of fees and payments, co-payments made by individuals or corporates and so on for the patient. Then the big one, Medicines and Related Substances Act, controlling our medicines within the country, its registration processes, unregistered medicine access, as you would be very familiar with the very recent COVID issues with ivermectin that other countries are experiencing, even with the COVID vaccine. And lastly, we sit in a domain where the Pharmacy Act is also umbrella as one of the bigger and larger legislative documents governing this environment. So if we have a quick look at what the public sector is, to clarify this for everyone sitting on this meeting today, it refers to healthcare services provided by our state and funded by public funds. So most often it is your public hospitals. The larger of them would be, for example, Baragwanath and Charlotte Makeke Hospital, many in our country. Most of those fall within the public sector together with their satellite clinics. Our system is having many challenges, in particular, uneven distribution of coverage of access to funding by the poor infrastructure and human resource constraints in our country. We are mostly funded in the public sector by taxation and the public social insurance schemes. It's good to know that in 2018, our healthcare facilities served about 83% of the population who were largely without medical insurance, while our private sector is sitting with 16.3% who have medical insurance. So this already should give the pharmaceutical sector a fair idea of product ranges that they would come in with into South Africa in terms of the segregation between public and private. So when we look at the private healthcare sector, it's the services that are funded privately by patients themselves or through private medical aid schemes and insurance through out-of-pocket payments. These are funded by social insurance schemes and other different medical aid schemes. Membership is voluntary. Medical schemes do comply with all the statutory requirements and benefit requirements that have their purpose to distinguish this system from the markets of a conventional type of insurance system. And many private sector corporates and people are attracted to the system because of the tax credits that one would achieve within our country system. Now, something that may impact upon the pharmaceutical industry in the very near future would be the upcoming national health insurance, like exists, for example, in Europe or the US, where South Africa has been embarking on this journey for many years now to establish the NHI, which is a means for universal health coverage. There is a draft legislation, the bill, that was gazetted, and it hasn't been implemented yet. We look at full implementation close to 2026 at the earliest. So this would be public funding. The private sector will still continue to operate in the interim even after 2026. And all South Africans, permanent residents and other registered users as defined in the Chapter 2 of the NHI bill will then be covered by this fund. So it is taking quite a lengthy time frame within which to have implemented. And ultimately, it's there like it would be for any other country for improving equity in financing, funding pools would be reduced, more affordable, accessible medication and health services granted for everyone in the country. So we move on now to the pharmaceutical industry trade associations. So if anyone were to delve into our environment, it's very important that you understand we have trade associations that would act on behalf of its member companies with legal action against, if required, or communicate with the authorities involved in that sector. So we have different trade associations, Innovative Pharmaceutical Association of South Africa. They house mostly predominantly the multinational companies with the innovative medicines, but there are some generic medicine companies that do belong to them as well. We've got the Generic and Biosimilar Medicines Forum. We've got Pharmisa. We've got the Self-Care Association of South Africa. We have the Animal Health Association. We've got Device Industry Association, SAMED. We've got Lab Diagnostic Association, the Health Products Association. These people deal with complementary medicines and health supplements. And we also have the Pharmaceutical Logistics Association. So these associations are super important for companies based in South Africa to become a member of, at a fee, of course, at a membership fee. And they try to keep their finger on the pulse with SAHPRA or the Pharmacy Council and any other relevant sectors that would impact on the specific sector that they represent. Then we have professional associations, SAHPRA, as in not SAHPRA, not our regulatory authority. This is SAHPRA, South African Pharmaceutical Regulatory Affairs Association. It's a group of regulatory affairs professionals. So people would become members of them or be listed on their mailing list. So one would be in tune with all the changing dynamic documents, updates from SAHPRA, our regulator, or from the Pharmacy Council, and any other relevant body like the Department of Health. There's also an association if you were to want to conduct clinical trials in our environment. You would want to be a member of SAHPRA, which is the Clinical Research Association. And then we also have another industry association that is known as SAPI, South African Association of Pharmacists in Industry. So let's move on to our regulatory authority, okay? The regulatory authority for South Africa is known as SAHPRA, South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, and then an entity part of the Department of Health. And for many of you who are well versed with the South African pharmaceutical industry, you would have known that we had, prior to 2017, we referred to our authority as the Medicines Control Council, which has subsequently been transitioned to what we now call as SAHPRA. So SAHPRA has assumed the role of the Medicines Control Council, and it has also taken on under its umbrella and control radiation control, which are all under, which were housed under the Department of Health. Subsequently, SAHPRA was constituted as now an independent entity that reports to the Minister of Health through its board. They are now based, they just moved within COVID time around October, November last year. SAHPRA have moved quite new to everybody in South Africa because SAHPRA really worked through paper-based submissions up until the COVID lockdown hit, which is quite an advantage. All right, I put a little picture there for you of people on the board, and for some of you who may have visited South Africa or the former MCC, you would recognize some faces here like Professor Shabir Banu, Advocate Hasina Kassim, all sitting on the board, Professor Helen Rees. These are very, very high-profiled people within the South African environment. So it would be of interest for each of you to understand who are the licensed facilities or how many manufacturers do exist in South Africa, or how many importers or exporters exist. So this is off the SAHPRA website. You will be able to Google this and find it on the SAHPRA website. I've given you the reference there. You will note South Africa has 3 licensed API manufacturing facilities. And mostly these border on also nutritional type products, multivitamins, and so forth. We have a bond store, 2 of them, 2 bond stores licensed by SAHPRA. There are cannabis cultivation licenses issued to 16 different parties. Then, for people like yourselves out there in Pakistan with Pakistani manufacturers, you'd probably want to have your product imported into South Africa and maybe even export from South Africa into the neighboring countries. You would probably fall within these importer-export category as you're seeing on my screen here. There are 178 of these companies licensed in South Africa. So these would include the likes of your multinational companies, your Roche, your Pfizer, your MSD. It would also include perhaps smaller pharmaceutical companies, generic companies that could be perhaps based outside of South Africa and are utilizing the import and export processes for the pharmaceutical product. Then we have 104 listed manufacturers and packers. And please note, these do include those involved as third-party manufacturers and those who are very involved with complementary medicines. As we all fully aware, over the past 20 years, we have had the manufacturing side really diminish in our country, where we have just a handful of very well-known manufacturing facilities in our country. Then our wholesaling companies, 160 of those. And then SAHPRA have listed on their site 8 provincial depots. So the depots are typically a wholesaling facility for public sector, or the storage facilities that house pharmaceutical products that are targeted for the, like I mentioned to you, the public sector, the larger hospitals in the country. And then very recently, they have a clampdown in South Africa on alcohol-based hand rubs, and to protect the public from substandard alcohol-based sanitizers or hand rubs. They have asked these companies to be licensed, and there are 5 of such companies. So if you have any type of product within these, the facet of pharmaceuticals, you would fall within one of these categories. So to highlight to you out there is that SAHPRA has now regulatory partnerships or acknowledgements more so of your IPRP, your pharmaceutical program, the WHO, your International Council for Harmonization, EVEREF, your vaccine program, NEPAD, and also the International Clinical Trials Registry Platform. SAHPRA are vocal about the acknowledgement of these other authorities and regulatory authorities, and they generally steer in line with whatever ICH promotes or WHO endorses. So you need to be very aware of that. So typically, a question to any one of you interested in investing in the pharmaceutical sector would be, well, how would I have my medicine registered? Okay. One would be enabled to do so and function as a company, allowing you to import and export medicines from Pakistan into South Africa, and perhaps if you expand your business in the emerging markets of the SADC region, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, etc., you would export as well. One needs to be a person residing in the Republic of South Africa to make such an application to the CEO of SAHPRA. So in simple terms, according to the law, this is, I've just excerpted Regulation 16 of our Medicines Act. So the company needs to be housed in South Africa. A person or a company outside of South Africa cannot be the market authorization holder or apply for medicine registration from outside of South Africa. Furthermore, one has to comply with all the particulars of the person as well as of the company who will be responsible for communicating with SAHPRA. So the application contemplated shall be accompanied by all this list of documents, as one would be aware of for those of you who are familiar with dealing with DRAP, Pakistan, and other international bodies. It goes without saying, any medicine registration file is accompanied by tons of other supportive documents, and it's the same for South Africa. So what do we acknowledge, or what does SAHPRA acknowledge? SAHPRA acknowledges applications made in what you will typically see on my slide is the triangular depiction of the CTD, the Common Technical Document, which is a very, very well-known ICH developed format of a medicine registration file. So typically, I would hope that many of you from the pharmaceutical side would have had some involvement with compiling CTD dossiers, known as a Common Technical Dossier or document, and South Africa follows the exact same format as is required in Europe and any other country. So these would stipulate the requirements of the prospective holder of certificate of registration, as well as you can see in alphabet B, everything about the medicine. So it's important to understand that the prospective holder of certificate of registration would be the local company, subsidiary of perhaps your Pakistani facility. You could set up a new company in South Africa, or alternatively, you could utilize an established pharmaceutical company to be your product market authorization holder for submission to SAHPRA in the aim of approval of registration. Then it's super important to understand that we have different formats of submitting a medicine registration file in South Africa. We call this an eCTD or an e-submission. Now, this is very different to the rest of the world. And people generally get quite confused about the definitions of eCTD and e-submission. You need to know we submit registration files in South Africa as a CTD, a Common Technical Dossier. How you do it could be in one of two ways. One could utilize eCTD software. Examples are the DocuBridge software system from Germany, the Extido system. There are many other systems and software packages available for purchase. So one would use eCTD software to create an eCTD. If a person does not use a software package, the way we submit a medicine registration file to SAHPRA would be in the CTD format, but without utilization of any expensive software package. And we refer to that same CTD as an e-submission. So the one is saying you're utilizing a software package, while the other you're not. So just to simplify, we would follow then the International Council on Harmonization, the granularity of the documentation. We would follow the ICH filing naming conventions. So it has become a very harmonized global approach where the dossier submitted to SAHPRA is a very recognizable format if you are dealing with other countries in Europe, and you probably would have experienced the whole CTD formatting process. So the big one, that's usually the barrier for entry and the rate limiting step, would be fees. But how much is it going to cost you? You can see very recently, just on my slide, you'll notice 22nd of December, and we are a little disturbed about the publication of these kinds of important gazettes close to the holiday season, which is generally a trend in South Africa. When everybody's on holiday and fast asleep, we have very important sets of documentation being published. So in this case, you can see that the Fees Gazette was published just very recent, and the fees has in fact, if not quadrupled, they have trebled from what was required previously by SAHPRA. So this has come as a shocker to the current pharmaceutical industry in South Africa, because they have not budgeted for these typically exceptionally high costs. An example would be if you have a new chemical entity, if you have an innovator product, just for submission to SAHPRA, it's 111,000 Rand. And in the past, it would be like 20,000 Rand. So you can see it's the scale has tripled completely in the opposite direction as expected by industry. The other typical disadvantage to the pharmaceutical industry is that, as you'll see in my upcoming slides, industry are demanding service delivery. All well and good, we'll pay these exorbitant fees, but are we having timeous and efficient responses from SAHPRA? Are we getting timeous, super fast approvals from SAHPRA? And that's the question. Another one, which I would assume, I'm just making an assumption, many of the Pakistani manufacturers would be very strong in some of the generic medicines to import into South Africa through your facilities. And you can see there, I've highlighted for you, it's 84,000 Rand per application. This actually really throws the budgetary systems that have been planned for since last year for our pharma companies in South Africa. It's thrown them out. So it's important, should you people be considering, please look at the fees. So all well and good. So we create a submission, and what is SAHPRA looking for? Okay, so SAHPRA would be looking for registration dossiers that are now qualifying by a reliance evaluation pathway. An application must have been approved by one or more recognized regulatory authority with which SAHPRA aligns itself. So it's super important that you understand on this list of countries that SAHPRA says they will shorten timelines by reviewing dossiers that are probably approved already in European Union, in Health Canada, by MHRA, the UK, by Japan, by Swissmedic, Australia, US FDA. So this puts you in a very difficult position should you want to expedite approval processes with SAHPRA. Because if, as we can see very clearly, India is not listed here, Pakistan is not listed here, China is not listed here. So when we in industry receive some of these registration dossiers, there are super brilliant dossiers put together, our problem or challenge becomes, oh, we cannot really shorten timelines because SAHPRA could go through the reliance or recognized systems, but they can't because these authorities are not listed on the recognized list. So you need to be very aware of this. And I'll just share with you a quick example, which I personally experienced, would be the ivermectin unregistered emergency medicine use in our country. SAHPRA were acknowledging that a person could apply for emergency use. However, on the basis that the facility that manufactured the ivermectin from any other country, that facility needed to be endorsed by EU WHO GMP or EU GMP US FDA approval, which made it really, really tough for us to source a cost-effective ivermectin source, understanding the drawbacks with our rand, dollar, rand, euro exchange rate. It made it exceptionally difficult to identify the best source because we were limited by the fact that the facility needed to have been approved by some well-recognized authority. Also important to note that we have in South Africa, SAHPRA will also have additional processes for collaborative review, which will stand you in good stead if you are trying or thinking about, well, wait a minute, Africa is an emerging market. I'd like to submit a registration file in South Africa and Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia. There are processes in place now, which, for example, I'll point you out to the Zazibona collaborative procedure, which is a joint effort between the different authorities. So SAHPRA, BOMRA, ZAMRA, all the countries that are members of Zazibona. I think Mauritius recently joined, Madagascar has joined the Zazibona system, where there'll be a joint review of dossiers submitted in the countries within the region. So this should expedite somehow your registration of your medicinal products in these countries. So that's nice to know. SAHPRA also acknowledges and are part of the WHO pre-qualification scheme and the processes that are attached to that, where we see registration files that are WHO pre-qualified are generally, obviously, the essential meds would have high priority at SAHPRA. The evaluation pathways, as I mentioned a little while ago, you could have a faster review and it's reliant. So the emphasis reliance, and that SAHPRA recognizes only those authorities I stipulated in the previous slide. Another very important aspect to be aware of is that SAHPRA have just early last year adopted all the European Medicine Agency guidelines. So this is quite an advantage to us if we're dealing with products already approved in the European Union. When it comes to variations of already registered medicines or even new medicines, you need to be fully aware we've adopted them. So SAHPRA haven't, they devised their own guidelines at SAHPRA, but they refer in those guidelines to specific quality guidelines for generic medicines or your bioequivalence guidelines, for variations, the EU variation classification system. And we found that this has fast forwarded and fast tracked a lot of our submissions that we've made to date. Right, so a little bit of background. You need to understand that when SAHPRA came in around 2017, it inherited a major backlog of registrations from the then Medicines Control Council. So it inherited, as you can see, it's humongous, around 16,000 applications. 8,000 were for new product registrations that were sitting in the system, believe it or not. And I very humbly and quite shyly say this, that some of these were sitting in the backlog since 1992. So very daunting for investors at the time who invested in submitting to South Africa, and these products just never got approved. So you need to be aware of, there's a huge project going on that started up in 2018, and the SAHPRA have moved very stealthily through it. It would have been, the project planners mentioned, it would be an 8-year process to clean up, but I'm pleased as well. I've experienced wonderful fast forwarding through these new projects that are going on, where there has been already a cleanup with the aim of being complete, I think, toward the end of next year for the catch-up. So your question would be, all right, Salma, all well and good, they caught up on all of these backlogs, and we want to submit next month, and what are the timelines like? They haven't published any timelines for review processes or evaluation processes. However, my personal experiences over the past 2 years, 95% of products that were submitted in the backlog project have been approved and registered. And then they've got this backlog running parallel to the acronym BAU, business as usual. So if you were to come into our environment with a pharma product, you would come in as business as usual with a brand new product submission. And for now, we're seeing that some are going like faster than 12 to 15 months. And this was never heard of. We would wait 3 to 5 years historically for a medicine to be registered. So I'm very pleased to say we need to be positive, and I hope I can entice you people to invest and to bring in products into South Africa with the changes at SAHPRA that are looking a lot more efficient. I have mentioned that SAPRA do look at collaborative work sharing processes. So here's a little slide, a little more information, which you can read up later, highlighting that you could get involved in these different processes. So we've covered product registration, but how do you exercise yourself within the pharmaceutical sector? Your facility needs to be licensed. So we looked at products, straightforward. Now we're looking at the market authorization holder. You would need a license to either manufacture, import, export, or wholesale or distribute medicinal products in our country. And as my screen clearly shows you, it's a threefold process. And it typically sometimes a chicken and egg situation. As you can see on the slide, we submit a license to SAPRA, its own license for your entity. We will submit another license for your entity to the Pharmacy Council, South African Pharmacy Council, and thirdly, to the National Department of Health to license yourself to trade as a pharmaceutical importer, exporter, or wholesaler, manufacturer, and so on. So you need to be very clear on this process. This process of licensing can take up to 12 months in our recent experiences that do include inspection by the authorities. Okay. So we've got license applications for importing, exporting allopathic medicines. Then we've got separate licenses for devices. So should you wish, these seem to be the simplest. If you were to enter in the simplest form, I find that the license applications for medical devices are the easiest, and we had a major influx in the past 5 years for medical device entities licensing themselves. And then a completely different license should you having a host of complementary medicines. And I also would understand that Pakistan is quite strong in terms of your strength in complementary medicines, which could be Unani Tib or Ayurveda, homeopathy, aromatherapy. So you need to understand there's a whole new system in place, and I'm sharing with you the little roadmap. SAPRA have devised a roadmap where as of July this year, for the first time, full-blown medicine registration dossiers are going to be called up in terms of therapeutic classes for submission in this into SAPRA. All right, so you need to be aware of. Right, so then we move on to licenses, fees. So I spoke to you a little bit, I shared with you a little bit about product fees. Let's look at the license fees. Again, not as high as the medicinal product, but to share with you, manufacturer licensing fees for a new license, 25,000 Rand, renewals, 22,000 Rand, and these renewals are submitted every year. Okay, so you have these hidden costs associated to your company and to your product registration. And lastly, we have the Department of Health who looks at your premises, and they will license your premises from on the third scale from their perspective. The Pharmacy Council, as I mentioned. A super important point to remember is that one cannot enter the pharmaceutical market with allopathic medicines and complementary medicines if you do not have a local responsible pharmacist employed at your company in South Africa. So this is also a bit of a drawback because in South Africa, we don't have enough skilled pharmacists who are clued up within the pharmaceutical industry who can call themselves a responsible pharmacist. And a responsible pharmacist is, the definition is made up in the Pharmacy Act. It's that pharmacist who will represent your company and who will be responsible to the Pharmacy Council from a legal perspective for all business issues occurring within the profession of pharmacy. So you need to be very aware of that. And I shared with you a QP. You people may be familiar with qualified person as it is in Europe. South Africa doesn't recognize the QP unless it's for a medical device licensing entity. So medical device entities, that's why I said to you, it's easier to get in to it's faster because you don't need a pharmacist. The licensing processes are a lot simpler with SAPRA for a medical device industry, whereas complementaries and allopathic medicines, typical medicines will need a pharmacist, and you get them fine few between who are well experienced, or when you do get somebody, they come at a high cost on a salary, monthly salary basis. So you sit with a difficult position where you say, but I'm not marketing any product, and how can I pay this pharmacist an astronomical salary when I'm not marketing? It's just a cost. So that seems to be a bit of a problem for many of the foreign companies wanting to come into South Africa. So I certainly hope that has given you a very brief summary and just in a nutshell what's going on within the pharmaceutical sector from a product perspective and a licensing perspective. I'd like to quickly share with you, without taking too much more time, a little bit about my company, Twins, the pharmaceutical company. So Twins, who are we? Yes, we're a set of identical twin sisters, Salma and Salima. My twin sister and I are identically qualified, both of us pharmacists, and we have pharmacy degrees and Masters of Science in Medicine, and also a business qualification. We've been in the pharmaceutical industry for over 27 years now, and each of us have been in the production environment, research and development, regulatory affairs, and we also have a strength in academia where we're consistently training people at undergrad level and postgrad level within regulatory affairs. Okay, we were initiated on our own. Salima and I jumped ship from corporates in South Africa in 2004, and we started up what is known as a triple BEE company, which is known as a broad black based economically empowered company. This now in a South African context, it's a form of economic empowerment for less advantaged people of the past who are not given the ability to enter these sectors within South Africa. We have a full staff complement of 10 pharmacists and non-pharmacists who assist us with registration. We are members of the different professional and trade associations, and I was a chairperson, former chairperson of SAPRA, the association, from 2017 to 2019, but I sat on the board there for over 20 years. You need to understand also that these little associations, they represent themselves at ITG, that means Industry Task Group, that used to sit with the then MCC and have now moved to SAPRA. So they sit and represent each member company. Academic involvement, we believe that our skill set need to be transferred and we need to be up to date with the latest legislative changes and country requirements. So, you know, academic involvement really ensures one is up to date, and we provide lectures at the different universities and also annually in London for the Management Forum UK. We also run our own pharmaceutical foundation for training, which is known as Foundation for Pharmaceutical Sciences, where we consistently training people within the pharmaceutical industry. We will assist as Twins, we will assist you with both your product and your licensing challenges that you may have should you want to enter the country with your pharmaceutical products. And as mentioned before, the three-way processes will be submitted. We design regulatory submission strategies. We'll compile your licenses and your product registrations. We deal with the regulator for inspection readiness programs, and we support our companies with their recommendation responses and assist them in managing their renewals throughout the life cycle of their products and their companies. We see to new chemical entities, generics, biosimilars, vaccine, blood products, complementary meds, veterinary medicines, devices, and medical gases. So we're quite fortunate. We're sitting in a position where, as a consultant company, we have the good advantage of touching all sorts of diverse products, which I think when one sits in just one company, you don't have the diversity which we're thankful for, that has given us some strength within the different facets in South Africa. We also do SADC region English African submissions for the clients at hand, South Africa, Namibia, and as you can see, mostly English speaking, but we've added in, we do sometimes work with Mauritius, Mozambique, Madagascar, who may not be necessarily English speaking, but we do assist with the CTD dossier compilation and submissions in this region. Okay, I've mentioned we've got our training arm there. And I've just listed to share with you all some very few, this is not an exhaustive list, some of the companies we work with, BioVac Institute, Pfizer, Roche, and so on. And you can see the diverse set of products that we deal with and companies that we deal with. Then just my final few slides. You would probably be asking yourself, well, Twins are a consultant company, so who will assist me as acting as my market authorization holder? We've got a company, the sister company called Zimbili Pharma. And trust me, the word Zimbili is actually African language, and it means twins as well, or same, it means the same. So we actually named the company Zimbili Pharma. And Zimbili Pharma is here to assist and provide you with a solution to say through an agreement, one would be able to, through a commercial agreement, you could utilize the services of Zimbili Pharma to register your products in South Africa. And Salima is the responsible pharmacist for that company. So this is my final slide, and I'd like to have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Salma. We are very grateful. Indeed, the presentation was very good, very informative, and I hope all the participants, specifically the exporters and the pharmaceutical exporters and manufacturers in Pakistan, they benefit from it. Now, I would request the guest speaker, Dr. Khalid M. Mirza, member Overseas Pakistani Advisory Council in South Africa. I would request for his remarks on the session and to also guide the pharmaceutical manufacturers in Pakistan. Thank you. Dr. Khalid Mirza Saab.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Ji, Dr. Saab.
First of all, I would like to acknowledge the thanks to Excellence Madam Amira Israr from the Commission by Madam Ismail. I'll put a completely different perspective that if you would like to apply for a South African visa today and you went to the High Commission of South Africa in Islamabad, and your chances of getting a visa to South Africa are probably less than 1%.
I think internet of Dr. Saab is a little unstable. Yeah, we have him. Yeah, Ji, Dr. Saab.
So we need to look at what are the practicalities. Now, if you look at products in South Africa, there are two kinds of products. One is what we call over-the-counter products, or second one here, for those you need a prescription by a medical practitioner. As far as those medicines are concerned, where you need a prescription by a medical practitioner, the margins of profit in this country are huge. And the mafia that controls that regulatory authority, they are so strong that, trust me, they will not let anyone in easily. Having said that, there are hundreds of products which are called over-the-counter products, for which you can, as Madam highlighted in her presentation as well, that it is relatively easy to import those products, and those products can be brought into South African market. I can give you an example. Yeah, Madam can correct me if I'm wrong, that if you take Panado tablets over here or Panadol tablets is mulk mein. So for 100 tablets, you are looking at close to 100 Rand or 1,000 rupees. But in Pakistan, I'm sure that the manufacturing cost and the sale price of same 100 tablets of Panadol will be far less than that. Certainly, there are margins of profit, and we must concentrate on exporting those goods from Pakistan, where you do not have to go through this lengthy regulatory authority permission processes. Just तरह मैंने पहले आपसे अर्ज किया कि यहाँ पे, if you look at it, you have got gloves, you have got disposable syringes, you have got swabs, you have got linen, you have got Panadol tablets, you have got different kind of painkillers, you have got multivitamins, you have got different kind of bandages, you have got there are hundreds of products where our pharmaceutical industry, certainly they can bring those products into the country and they can play a role. What I understand from Madam Ismail's presentation, that if you look at registering a company or registering a product in this country, you must understand that you are competing with the big kind of industry and big mafias from all over the world. And that may not be that easy for you. But in order to gain entry into the market, why not to look at over-the-counter products? Why not to look at those products for which the licensing process is very easy? And certainly I can tell you that there is a market over here in this country, and the reason it is so tight-knit is because of the huge margins of profit, and those people who have got hold of that industry do not want to let that hold go. यानी मैं आपको एक सादा सी एग्जांपल देता हूँ, जिस तरह ऑगमेंटन टैबलेट है. ऑगमेंटन is augmentin, whether it's manufactured in Pakistan or it's manufactured in South Africa. So why can't we import that kind of stuff to this country and go through the licensing process? And I had few discussions with the Ministry of Health as well, and trust me, they also say it openly that the prices of drugs in this country are beyond the reach of poor person. They have been highly inflated. If you look at the country, this is a country which has got high prevalence of HIV. There are hundreds and thousands of patients who have got tuberculosis. There are patients who are suffering from gastroenteritis. There are patients who have got chest infections. So let's look at the common things which a common man can use. But if you have to fight the mafia, trust me, it will take you months and years, and they will put every possible kind of restriction into your process for your product not to be approved. And over there, there's no rocket science. It is simply the margins of profit, which are 100 and 1,000 times in Africa as compared to third world countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. We are very grateful for your nice comments. What we gather from the presentation of Madam Salma Ismail is that the process is long, tedious, lengthy, and costly. But what Dr. Saab said, that there is a ray of hope. Sorry, there's a ray of hope that the profit margin is very high. So I think the Pakistani manufacturers, the exporters, they might devise a way to enter the market, keeping in mind, be very patient with the overall process, and keeping in mind the fact that there is a good profit at the end of this whole exercise. Now we will be taking questions from the participants. I would request everyone to keep their questions, as crisp as possible, and then mute their mic immediately after asking the question. So anyone who would like to ask can raise a hand, or from Madam Salma or from Dr. Saab. Well, the silence, in the audience, we also have Fatima Shakur, who is also a pharmacist in South Africa. The silence, should I take the silence as the presentation be completely understood by the audience, or otherwise, which I do not I would not agree with, because I completely got it. So we will be uploading this session, a webinar recording on the official YouTube channel of the Trade Commission of Pakistan in South Africa. So all those who miss it, we will share the link, email it to everyone in our contacts, and we will also try to share it with people as much as possible for them to benefit from. Now, I would request His Excellency Dr. Mazhar Javed Sahab to formally close the session, please. Dr. Sahab.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. I've been watching this session with great interest. And to be honest, it was a lot of education for me also. And there were two clear views of looking at the same, 2 points of view of looking at the same issue. One by Madam Salma Ismail Saiba, which was basically the technical details. And I must compliment her for presenting a very complex and a very complicated issue, the entire procedures with the timelines and all the details in a very simple, understandable manner, which kind of encourages our, at least in my view, it encourages our stakeholders back home, back in Pakistan, to venture into such business. Procedures may be difficult, procedures may be long, but the first requirement to complete the procedures is to understand the procedures. And in that, Madam Salma had a very, we made use of her eloquence and the clarity of her thought. The other dimension, entirely different way of looking at the same thing, which was a more practical and gives us a macro view. That's equally important, because until and unless you understand the macro view or the larger perspective, you can't really use your technical knowledge fruitfully. So I'm grateful to both the speakers, and also I'm encouraged by the interest shown by the stakeholders and the businessmen in Pakistan. What is important is that let this seminar, I must also compliment Humaira for organizing this whole affair. Let this seminar be a starting point of a process. Let it not be the culmination of a process. Let it be a starting point where we try to understand the procedures and the dynamics of South African market, the restraints or the limitations or the opportunities that our businessmen and stakeholders in Pakistan might view in the whole scenario. We, as the embassy, Humaira, as the trade commissioner, we remain at everybody's service to play a pivotal role, the role of a facilitator, the role of connecting the two sides, which is our main job as the trade commissioner and as the High Commission. So we will remain available to all, serve any of these queries, to connect different business to business interests, to fill in any information gaps, to build up the skills. So we are always available. Once again, my thanks to Madam Salma and our guest speaker, Salim Mirza Saab, for enlightening us on a very important issue, throwing lights on from different angles. Thank you very much. Thanks. And thanks, Humaira. My compliments to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Thank you, Madam Salma. I'm really grateful for the presentation, for the effort that you took, for the pain that you took throughout these days while we requested you for this presentation. We will share your contacts with all the people, and we will upload this on our official YouTube channel. Thank you, Dr. Saab. You took time out of your routine, and we totally appreciated. As we can see, you are in your professional attire, you are in your medical unit, but despite that, being on your duty, you joined us for the service. You know, it's for the service of to serve the country, and of course to the people in Pakistan. With this, we would just end the webinar, and if there are any other queries, the trade office, as as rightly pointed out by the esteemed High Commissioner, is at your service. The High Commissioner is at your service. TIA.johannesburg@commerce.gov.pk is the official email address. You can reach out to the trade office at this email address. We are here to facilitate you. We are here to serve you. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Just thank you, everybody, and thank you so much, His Excellency, for the concluding remarks. I really appreciate it, and we will avail ourselves to assist in any manner going forward. Thank you again, and goodbye, everyone.